This is the fifth event in relation to the AGM video conference series. We have already completed 4 video conferences, and obviously there's a further 4 to go following this meeting. And all of these meetings will be made available through ittf.com following each of the presentations themselves. And with that, I will now hand over to James Morris, the ITTF Executive Vice President, who is responsible for the strategic plan. James, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And a good evening from New Zealand to table tennis friends from all around the world. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to this important session. And I thank you all for taking the time to attend this strategic plan webinar. Today, you will be updated to where this federation is currently sitting with strategy. But before this, I'd actually like to just have a couple of comments. Without a doubt, the pandemic has been challenging and it has affected some outcomes of our plan. We all know that the last 2 years has seen very limited sports activity around the world. This, however, highlights the need for international sports federations in adversities to have robust plans going forward to navigate such crises. And I am convinced this has been the case in our federation. With the direction given by the current strategic plan, and it has helped towards making early, difficult decisions, which has left ITTF in a stronger position than several international sports federations. I thank my EC colleagues for their continued support towards our strategy. And having said that, the staff have over the last year been very proactive, reviewing their specific areas of the plan and aligning the milestones to reflect current reality. Also, those of you who attended the Foundation and the WTT webinars and saw those presentations and the very proactive course the entities are taking, we must align this group to our overall plan. We again have Deloitte on board, and they have been assisted in this. They have been assisting in this refresh process, and I take the opportunity to thank Chris Hansen and his team for their professional, robust expertise to obtain the best outcome. I must also mention my gratitude to our hard-working staff and our key staff members in charge of specific pillars who have worked throughout this review. Thanks to Michael Brown for driving this process and keeping it on track. We are also very aware that this is an election year with a new EC to be elected. So this refresh is still in a living and breathing form, with the new EC and stakeholders to have further input after the elections. Finally, a strategic plan which lives and breathes requires frequent stakeholder input. For a plan to work well in any organisation, it needs to be embraced by all. I thank all of those who have contributed in the past, and I wish you all to stay safe, and I look forward to a very good session. Thank you, and I will now pass over to ITTF Group CEO, Steve Dainton.
Thank you very much, James, and a huge welcome also here from Singapore. Good evening to everyone, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from. As James has mentioned, many things actually, but we've come a very long way since the first ever strategic plan was put in place in 2018. The growth in the first 2 years were really tremendous, both financially, but also through the activity. It was really very apparent how quickly and how fast our plan was coming to life. As James said, we founded the ITTF Foundation in 2018, and then finally the resources we put into place to develop our commercial growth which eventually led to the birth of World Table Tennis that launched this year in 2021, has also seen some massive changes to the way we're dealing with our strategic plan. As also mentioned, the largest crisis in most of our lifetimes hit when the COVID-19 pandemic started in early 2020, and it's something that's continued to have a major impact on our lives even up until today. With all that in mind, at the end of 2020, in fact, probably even before that, we knew we needed to make a review and restructure of this plan, a restructure that would fit better the current realities, the reality of operating in a pandemic during a crisis that has caused us to scale down quite a lot, but also with the reality of some of the bold plans that we had with both World Table Tennis, the foundation, and many of our other pillars finally coming to life. The new approach has forced us to relook at not only the ITTF strategic plan, but also at our own overall structure. And this is something we have been working on in the past months or last couple of years. You may have heard us talking about the ITTF group concept as something we've been developing, something that we believe will bring cohesion to all the work we are making within the different entities. The staff have therefore been working with our partners at Deloitte to review the current strategic plan, taking into consideration all the aspects mentioned above, and to propose in the near future some adjustments to that plan. As James mentioned, it's no secret there will be a new executive committee elected in just over 3 weeks' time. They also need to be heavily involved in the new plan, and we plan to present the new ideas to them for their feedback, and as James mentioned, also to look to our stakeholders, both from our membership, but also our other external stakeholders, the continents, commercial partners, et cetera, for their feedback. And the plan actually will be to present you something reshaped for the 2022 AGM, hopefully in Chengdu in May, June next year. Today, together with our CFO, Michael Brown, we will present to you an update of where we are at with the current strategic plan, share with you some of the work the staff has been doing in the background. We will also have Deloitte give some updates from the work that they have been doing, and also try to explain a little bit where we are with the thinking around the ITTF group, and to try and include this in the future strategy. I also want to thank many people, of course, who have been part of this journey. First of all, thanks to our executive committee colleague, James Morris, for leading this project and for being with us on the executive committee in the ITTF for the last 4 years. James, we really appreciate everything that you've done and hope that you don't forget us and continue to work hard for table tennis in the future. We really appreciate your not only your great work, but also your friendship and look forward to a really to continuing. I'm a little bit emotional about that, but to continuing to work together in the future. Also, thanks to all the members and all the stakeholders for watching this strategic plan come to life and giving us the green light and all the feedback in the last few years. We hope you give us more feedback in the future, because for sure, as we've always said, and using James' famous words, this is a living and breathing document, which we hope to improve and to make even better and bigger for the future. With all that said, I'd like now to pass on to Michael to give an update of where we're currently at, and I will be back later to give more information about the ITTF group and some further ideas. Thank you so much. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Steve. So an initial part of the presentation today will be looking at some of the progress we've been able to achieve over the year of 2020, looking into each of the different 5 strategic priority areas and how we've been able to progress since the beginning of the strategic plan as endorsed and approved by the ITTF AGM back in 2018, as well as some of the ongoing highlights that are taking place during 2021 as well, because we are towards the end of the current year. And then also looking to see how we've been managing the monitoring and evaluation before then moving into the initial refresh process that we've been starting to undertake. So as I think everyone who's experienced a strategic plan before, we do have the 5 different strategic priority areas, with organisation and governance being one of the core areas. So if we start looking at how the performance of organisation and governance has happened over the last 3 years, we can see an initial very good increase in 2018, which introduced part of a constitution update or a handbook update. And then obviously in 2020, we had quite good progress made, which was quite evident through the pandemic as well, because whether it sounds positive or negative, at the end of the day, organisation and governance was probably the area that had the least impact when it came to the pandemic, because international travel or having table tennis being played on the table is not something that holds back organisation and governance. And there's been quite a few different areas we've been able to achieve. So looking at a couple of the specific highlights, for those who have been following, the Continental Federation agreements are now being combined into Master Continental agreements, which was one of the key objectives to have in place by 2021. And we're also looking, or we have been able to improve an equitable process in terms of campaigning for elected positions, meeting a higher standard. So that's also been evidenced through the introduction of this year's upcoming elections. Probably one of the more successful areas that was noticed in 2020 was the ASOF review of International Federation governance, where ITTF was seen as one of the most growing or the most improved governance areas. So we did increase from an initial position of 21 up to number 11. And we have moved from the grouping of B into A2. So quite positive, and obviously reward for all the hard work that has been done behind the scenes, and often is maybe not seen in the promotional aspect of table tennis. But as witnessed through the overall progress, we can see we are moving quite strongly towards overall improvement of our organisation and governance. And of course, from the professionalization that's being managed by the day-to-day operational staff as well, we can gradually see more and more of that come to the front of the way in which we organize and present ourselves as an organization. The second second area of priority is high performance and development. And we can see there's been gradual improvement year on year. Throughout the pandemic in 2020, there was some limited opportunities to be able to do face-to-face on the table training, let's say. However, fortunately, our high performance and development department was able to pivot and understand how to operate during the pandemic. And that also leads to some of the new areas of focus that are gradually being introduced this year as well, in terms of some online training, some online webinars, some activities that allow remote participation and so on. So very much adapting to a new world at the moment with the use of technology. So a couple of the main achievements in 2020 was to further enhance a more diversified and targeted portfolio, which is providing more opportunities for national associations to develop table tennis within each of their countries. And then by being able to use technology, have been able to adopt and provide training and education opportunities globally, even though there has been some restrictions with international travel. The recent launch of the ITTF participation program is a great example of how some of those achievements have been able to further evolve, and how table tennis, through the support of our HPD team, have been able to grow obviously the participation of table tennis, but also providing pathways of how not only athletes, but also coaches and officials and all stakeholders of table tennis can become more involved in the development and growth of table tennis. International events, one of the key areas of focus for ITTF, and now more so for World Table Tennis. In 2018, saw some initial growth in relation to the various activities that were put in place to lay the foundation for future years. Then further enhancement in 2019. And then of course in 2020, there was a little bit more or not as much movement, let's say, which was primarily due to the large number of events being cancelled or suspended due to the pandemic. So unfortunately, not as much progress was able to be made on an outward facing point of view, but there's also been a lot of continuous behind the scenes work being undertaken, which a lot of the evidence will be seen in the coming years as well with a new event structure. that has been or started to be introduced in 2021. So that was one of the key objectives that was achieved, was being able to introduce a more clear and understandable competition calendar for the future to help build an ongoing dialogue with our fans, which will then help for better engagement and promotion. The introduction of the World Table Tennis and the new event series has helped to create in-demand events that is helping to get greater appeal to host cities and countries, which has started to see some of the benefits already within the initial days of World Table Tennis being active as the events and commercial arm of the ITTF group. The introduction of the various tiers of the WTT event series, including the WTT series being the more elite or premier series of events, as well as the WTT feeder series due to be brought into play in the coming months at the beginning of 2022. And obviously this year with a revamped WTT youth series, where we do hope to see upwards of 200 events taking place per year once the borders do open around the world, and free travel around different countries will become much easier. So obviously this is something that a lot of work has gone into place behind the scenes, and now we're gradually starting to see some of those rewards come through. Similar with promotion, so an initial jump with being able to see 25% achievement in 2018, and then an additional 11% in 2019, before unfortunately a smaller growth in 2020. Again, quite impacted by COVID-19. Not so easy to promote table tennis when there's not the ability to have table tennis events taking place around the world. However, there has been some initial areas or some initial objectives that have been achieved. For example, the new partnership that's in place between World Table Tennis and IMG will help to enhance the TV production level and ensure a consistent experience for TV broadcasters, which hopefully then will lead on to greater revenues in the coming years as well for TV rights. Another good example for promotion that was still able to take place during the pandemic was during World Table Tennis Day, where our ITTF Foundation was able to promote World Table Tennis at Home Day, which did see one of the key outcomes being met in 2020, where we did see over 75% of national associations participating in the activities on 6th of April. So quite an exciting achievement to be able to put in place during the pandemic itself. One of the key areas where promotion will move forward was the launch of the WTT mobile app. So the first time table tennis has had a mobile app that's showing the latest results, the live scores, live streaming, and so on and so forth. So for those who may not have yet had the chance to download the World Table Tennis mobile app, this is a great opportunity for us to be able to promote our sport and put it onto people's smartphones, which is generally the device people are using the most in their day-to-day life. So hopefully we start to see even further promotional activities and promotional opportunities coming with the launch of the mobile app itself. The fifth strategic priority area is revenue, which did see initial upticks in the first couple of years, as Steve had mentioned earlier, and then unfortunately not as much growth during the pandemic area. But again, a lot of foundations being laid for future growth in terms of overall revenue across the ITTF group. So again, significant work was undertaken towards the launch of the new event products. Change doesn't happen overnight in terms of having just with a change in regards to the event structure doesn't necessarily mean that from one day to the next day, the revenue will double or triple or whatever it may be. But we do feel as though we've got a good foundation now, which will allow for growth in the coming years. And another area that was taken into more consideration during 2020, especially driven by the pandemic, was looking at how we can further diversify our revenue streams to reduce the overall risk. So the more revenue streams we have that are not directly impacted or correlating with each other, obviously makes it much easier for us to remain more financially stable. And there's some sort of areas we've been looking into in how we can further diversify those revenue streams, whether it's based on a geographic element or whether it's also based on the different products or the different ways in which we generate and produce our own revenue. So as mentioned before, with the event side, the events being the key area where revenue can be generated, obviously with the introduction of World Table Tennis provides a great opportunity for more significant revenues to be generated. And as part of the Financial Forum presentation that will be made later this week, there will also be an example of how the new approach with regards to events can help us to introduce new revenues as well, primarily through event hosting fees, but more on that later in the week. With regards to monitoring and evaluation, so this was, I touched upon at the very beginning, is quite important in regards to once we have the strategic plan itself in place, we also need to be consequent, or we need to understand how are we performing against the strategic plan itself. So with the 2018 to 2024 strategic plan being the first strategic plan in place from the ITTF, it was important for us to start to build out our own internal monitoring and evaluation. We did have some initial guidance provided by Deloitte in how we could look to undertake that. However, moving forward, we should also be looking at ways in which we can make that monitoring and evaluation a bit more independent, which will then help to meet higher standards of governance. So at the end of the day, we want to ensure that the day-to-day operational work is being undertaken in line with the strategic plan, which ultimately means that the organization is held accountable to the strategy that's been approved by the ITTF AGM. So this will be part of an area that we'll look to introduce further once we've undertaken the refresh and review. But I think an important area for any organization that's, let's say, assessing itself in a way, but to introduce more independence of that will also make us more accountable and therefore ensure that we do follow and align ourselves with the strategy itself. So having said that, I will now pass back over to Steve to be able to provide a bit of an update on how and why we've looked to undertake the strategic plan refresh itself.
Thank you, Michael. Just double checking the technology here. But yeah, as I think as we've said a few times, I'd say in the beginning, before going into the slides, that with such a massive change over the last few years in the ITTF, and as we've worked on the strategic plan for the first couple of years, and seeing then the changes that we understood because of the plan that we needed to make, that being one part, and therefore as a result the foundation and World Table Tennis coming to life being an important part, but also due to COVID-19 and the massive shift in thinking that we've had to take, we've had to pivot in many areas, we had to scale down in other areas, we've had to do more work in different parts of the ITTF, and I think we speak about it later, but you can see some examples where, for example, in the governance work of the ITTF, there's been a huge amount of work in this last couple of years where events had to take a back seat, or where we've put a fair bit of investment towards information technology in the last couple of, especially this last year and a half when COVID's been a major player and we couldn't do the normal activities that we've been used to doing. And I guess all of that has led to us to sit down and say, it's great that we had our first ever strategic plan, and being the first one as well, it was a huge learning experience for us to go through it and to put it together in the first place. But then to sit down, almost halfway through it or roughly halfway through it now and say, okay, what are the things that are working well? What are the things that haven't worked well? Because not everything has been perfect, that's clear. And then to figure out around that, how can we refresh and update that plan? So we did send a survey out to the member associations in February 2020. We got a fair bit of feedback. That being said, we're at a stage now where we think we might have to go back to the stakeholders because that time compared to now is quite different. Then we did a fair bit of study on those results. And then we've also gone and our staff has also looked deeply internally into all the different areas that they've been working on. So there's a lot of work gone into us, let's say, checking and evaluating and so forth the overall strategic plan. And now we move to the next stage. And of course, we've had Deloitte helping us massively with that. And I mean, we talk about COVID-19, but I think there's not a lot that needs to be said about that. On March 11, my birthday was when it actually started, and we've been working hard with COVID-19 and the changes that it's brought to our organization to deal with that. And as I've said just earlier, the foundation coming to life, and I hope you enjoyed their presentation a couple of weeks back. You can see the huge amount of work that they are doing from the CSR level at the ITTF, but also then last week with World Table Tennis and the huge change that we hope that brings to the ITTF as well. And with those, especially those two key new entities coming to life, it really was and is time for us to reshape and relook at the strategic plan. And with that, I will soon pass it over to Deloitte, but as you know, we did engage Deloitte in, we've been working with Deloitte now for many years. Firstly, they helped us with a relook at the World Table Tennis Championships, and then they started to help us with the strategic plan when it came into place in 2018. They helped us with a lot of the back end of discussing with the stakeholders and putting that together and having a lot of, I think we had 2 or 3 quite big conferences and sessions together with continents, with key stakeholders in ITTF, and really came out with the strategic plan. And then the 2 major reasons for a refresh, it was clear that we needed to update the existing strategic plan and objectives rather than a full review. I mean, COVID and the fact of the new entities. So as mentioned earlier, we will have a new executive committee coming in less than a month. It will be a great chance to work with them on their new ideas and their new goals and what things they would like to also bring to the table. And then together with the hard work that the staff has done, together we will hopefully come up with a bigger and better and super improved strategic plan for you in 2022. With that, I believe I'm passing over to Chris Hansen at Deloitte, and thank you, Chris and Zal, for all the great work and the help with this huge project that you've done, not only from the very beginning when we first started in 2018, but also this last year when we've started to make this refresh. So over to you, Chris, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steve. And, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone as well. It's a pleasure to speak to you all. I hope you're doing well. And hopefully some of you might recognize my face. I've had the privilege of working with Steve and Michael and James and the rest of the team since that sort of 2016. So through various iterations of the project, and my colleague Zal and I have been working to support this strategic plan refresh exercise since earlier this year. I just wanted to use this opportunity to update everyone on the work that we've been doing with the ITTF management and with the 3 respective organisations over the course of these last 9 or 10 months. And whilst our remit initially was to focus very much on refreshing the strategic plan for the reasons that Steve and Michael have outlined, and emphasis there on refresh. It wasn't a rewrite. It was looking at how it could be sort of enhanced and move forward, given the sort of events over the last few years. However, quite early on in our process, it became apparent that it was important to define the roles and responsibilities of each of the 3 organisations from both a strategic and operational level. And having clarity on those was quite sort of fundamental to being able to achieve the strategic plan. And ideally, we were looking to arrive at a situation where we felt we could sort of, in one sentence, neatly summarise what each of the 3 organisations does and how it contributes to the wider growth of the sport. And so what you'll see on screen now is a summary of that exercise. very much briefly, just describing what you see is, the ITTF is that international governing body from Olympics through to grassroots. WTT is responsible for the events and the commercial side of the business, revenue generation and then reinvestment into the sport. And then the foundation is that CSR arm for social programs. And that work was really giving us the platform and giving the sport the platform to better achieve those strategic objectives. So after having agreed with the management in each of the respective organizations what that clarity on roles and responsibilities were, our attention sort of turned towards how we could move forward with the strategic plan itself to bring it up to date to reflect everything that's happened, and primarily looking at examples of things like COVID-19, the fact that we now have these 3 new organizations that are, empowered to focus on their specific remits, but needing to bring that all together as a whole to ensure that it worked for the best of the sport. And that led us on to something around the ITTF group, which Steve is going to talk a little bit more about later. But that's all sort of founded on facilitating better collaboration between the 3 organizations and for that long-term sort of betterment of the sport. So it kind of can maybe sound a bit nebulous when we're talking about what the strategic plan refresh was, and ensuring that it does come across that it's not a replacement, it's just a refresh, and where that process is. So to sort of help with that, we've set out a few examples on the following pages to bring it to life a little bit for everyone. So the sort of first main example that we've got on the following slide is mainly just to demonstrate something that does become apparent and is a theme throughout all of these presentations, I imagine, is, well, we can look at what happened from COVID-19 and how clearly that affected the event side of things from a table tennis perspective. And you can see there an example of something that was originally part of the strategic plan in 2018 that clearly couldn't be delivered due to COVID-19. So as a result, the team and we worked together to define something that is more ambitious, working towards 2024, that takes into account what's happened, but also the progress that the WTT and ITTF have made over the last few years in investing in the technology that sits behind all of this. And I think COVID has demonstrated to us all, notably by the way that we're giving this presentation, how important that kind of underlying tech platform is to deliver any sort of mass engagement plan, and particularly one that's refreshed on and focused on growing the sport globally. The next example that I'd like to kind of share with you is more around then specifically looking at something that's a result of having developed these 3 distinct organizations that sit as part of the ITTF group, and how we wanted to then move the organization as a whole on to recognize the progress that's been made. And where the original objective was sort of broad around creating more of a spectacle around events themselves, the kind of dedicated focus that's now offered through WTT means that a more sort of specific view of what that looks like can be written into the plan, and a more ambitious vision of what an entertainment event should be in the future. So that's where that change has been made. So I now sort of hand over to my colleague Zal, who will run you through a couple more of the examples.
Thanks, Chris. So this is an example of a new objective that's created as a result of the establishment of the ITTF Foundation. A core activity of the foundation is social impact and leaving behind a legacy. Now, this proposed new objective is designed to hit that target. And it's also a really good example of the 3 organizations working together, and in this case, the ITTF Foundation and the WTT. This is an example of a new objective created as a result of the ongoing importance of climate change and sustainability. And now there's no denying that sport is an extremely powerful vehicle. Sport can play a role in both addressing the environmental footprint and as a medium to communicate the importance of climate change by informing and educating fans. So it was really important that sustainability and climate change objectives are embedded into the ITTF strategy and this new objective is designed to hit that purpose. And finally, we also in some cases made minor wording amendments for objectives to reflect any changes in terminology. So for example, this objective is the same, but adds establishment and management of continental federations at the start. And it also updates for the terminology change from now renaming ITTF Centers of Excellence as Table Tennis Academies. So before I hand back to Steve, I just want to emphasize that this is part of an ongoing process and it's not the completion of the process. And it's a strategy refresh, so the 5 core pillars will remain the same. So Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Zal, and thank you, Chris. And again, thank you so much for all the hard work and for pushing us. Occasionally, we haven't always been the fastest to react in a very busy and difficult environment, especially trying to make things happen during this COVID period. But we really appreciate your professionalism and support in helping us make this this refresh. I want to talk, as already coming up there in the Deloitte slides, a little bit about the ITTF group. The ITTF group is a concept that started coming together, at least for a few of us, probably in the second quarter of 2020, but which really took a long time to discuss internally, to debate, and so forth. And I mean, as we've seen there today, and as I've discussed, several times throughout this evening, the ITTF created the ITTF Foundation and has created World Table Tennis, all with the intention to be able to manage in the commercial areas of the sport in a reasonably autonomous but still connected way with ITTF, and also the CSR activities in a similar fashion. So, we sit there with these 3 entities: World Table Tennis, the ITTF, and ITTF Foundation. On the left, you see World Table Tennis. On the right, you see the foundation. Both created by the ITTF, and we still really started to try and ask ourselves, how do these entities work together, help each other, and try to ensure that everything is happening in the best interest of table tennis worldwide. And we started to we thought in many different ways. Are they connected simply like this, or is maybe even ITTF having a more important role overall? Is that in the best interest to help grow the commercial part? Is that in the best interest to help the CSR to be able to act in its best way? Of course, some people will say yes, it must, and others will say you need slightly more independence. Well, it was clear from us that there needs to be synergies between the 3. They need to be able to work hand in hand. They need to be all working in the best interest overall for the sport. And ITTF ultimately were the ones that was the one that created both World Table Tennis and the foundation. And we got to, I guess, to a place where we thought that we need something or some group or some, I guess group is the right word, group of people to come together and be the kind of gel that makes sure that all of the entities are working very well together. Remembering where we came from in the first place, of course, from the International Table Tennis Federation, but then to try and really work hand in hand to make sure that table tennis and our strategic objectives and the plan that we had in place through the strategic plan can really come to life. And that, we felt at the end was ITTF having a relatively strong governing role in that space, but still allowing World Table Tennis and the foundation to have some relative freedoms to go ahead and do what we think that they need to do in their areas that's in the best interest of our sport. And there's for sure a balance, and we know, and it was clear in the last 12 months, there's been different voices and some very supportive of what we're doing, and some even critical and asking us questions if this is in the best direction of the ITTF. I guess after a few years and trying to set this up, I believe we're getting close to this concept of the ITTF group. I wouldn't say that we've 100% nailed it down and got it perfect yet, and it still needs further refinement and further discussions with all the stakeholders. It'll need the new executive committee's input onto how best to manage this this group structure, and we'll have to have further, I think, debates and opinions as we move forward. But I guess for a few of us in our mind, we're getting close to this ITTF group thinking. I was promoted to the ITTF group CEO a few months ago with that press release going out. Michael will be the ITTF group CFO. We'll try to have also some shared services between the three entities, both for economies of scale, but also to ensure that we have a good feeling over the three different entities. And slowly but surely, we're coming to a space where we think that the three entities working hand in hand together will really be in the best interest of the sport. As I said, this still a work in progress. This is still a concept in progress, starting to get some momentum in the last 6 to 12 months. We'll try to figure it out even better. We'll try to even put some governance around it if possible, and make sure that we're meeting all those standards that we're fighting to achieve as an international federation and as a sport of table tennis. But we believe we're getting close, and with this we can really make something great for our sport. And I think that's roughly an idea around the ITTF group, and maybe there's a fair bit of questions related to that, or maybe there's a fair bit of questions related to the strategic plan, and would be really happy to take the last, I guess we have plenty of time. It's only 43 minutes into the session, and we'd be happy to have questions and answers. And thank you very much for listening to our update on the strategic plan. And then, Michael, should I hand it back to you, or would you like me to go through the next steps?
Yes, thanks, Steve. Let's go through the next steps, and then we'll go back to a couple questions that have been raised in the Q&A section. So we'll be able to answer those following these the update on the next steps.
Just to quickly go through, I hope you can hear me. It just showed me that I was muted, but hopefully it's working now. The next steps will be actually to formalize, as Chris had there, the roles and responsibilities of each organization of the group. And we will do that, as I mentioned many times, together with the new executive committee. And also through further stakeholder consultation. As we said many times, the overall goal is to further the development and growth of table tennis around the world. We'll try to be reaching out to, I think, all the stakeholders in the next few months to also give us a more, or to have a deeper discussion about what you think needs to be achieved and what we can do better for table tennis in the next period. And I guess, and that will be, of course, up to the next executive committee as well to decide when would be the timing to do a complete review of the strategic plan. This current one, as you know, is the 2018 to 2024 strategic plan. In essence, we have 3 years left. But also, as you've seen tonight, there's been so many changes and adjustment. It may be fruitful to make a new strategic plan even earlier, depending on the direction that the next executive committee and the next phase of the ITTF would like to take. And with that, then I think we're coming to the end, Michael, and I'll pass it to you and to manage the last part of the questions and answers.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So we have had a couple of the questions come through throughout the presentation itself, and I will more or less read out the question, and I'll hand over for you, Steve, to be able to answer the first question that has been raised, or the first comment and remark, which follows up with the question. So from Jaguar Robert from Uganda. So congratulations to the ITTF team on the improvement in the ASOIF governance ranking. To move from number 21 to 11 in the world is really magnificent. Top marks here. Many of our member associations lack secretariats, and this has a serious impact on our own good governance capabilities within our member associations. In many member associations, the political leadership is also the professional leadership team, which always creates issues. Are there any plans to help us in this area, or at least in the continental groupings of member associations, which can perhaps be easier and cheaper? So over to you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jaguar Robert, for your question, and it's a very good question. I think probably the best way to answer that is to say that, as you've seen in the ITTF, we've really worked hard in the last couple of years, and especially this time when we've had a chance to sort of sit down and focus on the overall governance. And here I would give a lot of credit to not only the executive committee has been quite strong on that, including our president, Thomas Weikart, who was pushing for strong governance from day one, but also to our Secretary General, Rao Kalin, and our legal counsel, Dylan Ma. They put an unbelievable amount of work into trying to improve our standards of governance. And I guess what we've come to a realization at the end is that it's not only okay that us as an international federation has high levels of governance standards, but we need also our member associations to have a high level of governance standards. And I believe the team, together with Rao, Dylan, and also our members relation director, Munir Basar, are putting a proposal together to be approved by the executive committee in the future, that we need to also start to perhaps rank or rate, I don't know if that's exactly the final outcome, our member associations in terms of the governance standards as well. And that hopefully will then encourage them to improve in those areas, because we're not only viewed externally as an international federation ourselves, but we're also viewed by how strong our member federations are and our member associations are. And the stronger they are in governance, the better it will look for table tennis and the ITTF. So I believe over the next 4 years, there will be a fair bit of work put in that area. We've improved our own governance in the last few years and the last cycle, but the next cycle is to also then go and support our member associations, and in some cases also hopefully our continental and other stakeholder bodies. Hope that answers the question.
And we do have a follow-up or an additional question as well. So a question coming from the European Table Tennis Union President, Mr. Leviton. How these plans are being agreed with continental federations, and is it right that all these decisions are being taken from the higher ITTF management and not from national associations? And it could happen that these plans could not fit in line with the continental federation's activities. So perhaps, Steve, do you also want to respond to this question as well?
Yes, it's my pleasure, and thank you, Mr. Leviton, and thank you, Ilya, for a very, very good question, I would say, because I think in the last year or two, probably there's been a fair bit of rumor regarding staff or management having too much, I don't know what the right word is, but too much control or power over certain things. But we've never moved away from the governance structures that are in front of us. And for us, it's already clear that as part of the Constitution, it is the AGM that needs to approve the strategic plan. So that's the first point there. that means that whatever changes, whether it's coming from management or the ITTF Executive Committee or whoever that we make or want to make to the strategic plan, it must be approved by the ITTF AGM. And I think that's the first very key point in ensuring that we have a very strong governance structure, that it's our member associations that decide on the plan that we're to take. Secondly, and I think unfortunately you were not the president at that time when we'd made our first strategic plan, but in the first instance when we made the strategic plan back in 2017 and 2018, when we did all that work, we had several conferences and several gatherings which included not only management, but included executive committee members, but it also included the continental presidents. There was even one meeting, at least one meeting here in Singapore that we had that included the continental presidents in the conference and in the planning, the pre-planning stages of the strategic plan. And it was also part of Deloitte's remit to ensure that all stakeholders gave their input into how the strategic plan would look like when we brought it to the AGM in 2018. So I believe Deloitte had phone calls and several follow-ups with all continental presidents in 2017, 2018 in determining what was the strategic plan back then. It's true that, as we said, we need to make a refresh, and as we've talked about the whole night, we need to review and look at the future. And I believe it will be, again, important to ensure that all those stakeholders, including continental presidents, continental federations, and probably most importantly, because they are our members, the member associations need to give their feedback into the refresh and what the new strategic plan may look like. And I hope that helps answer the question.
Thanks again, Steve. So a couple more questions have come through as well. And the next question is, it's actually coming from an anonymous attendee. However, it is quite a good and relevant question, and we will be passing over to Chris Hansen from Deloitte to be able to respond. Thank you for all that excellent overview and report, and congratulations on the work done, especially on governance. Question for Deloitte. In terms of strategic objectives and linked monitoring and evaluation, how will the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals be embedded? Strategically, at least till 2030, it will be important to report the impact of table tennis on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for the question. It's a very apt point and something that's very topical at the moment. And yeah, I can assure you it is something that has been discussed when we have been working with each of the three organizations around these refresh elements. We've made sure that we've spoken to each organization in turn, and that's something that we've had repeated conversations with the foundation around the importance of recognizing the groups and table tennis as a sport's contribution towards those. One of the proposed sort of updates to the plan would include a refreshed objective that specifically recognizes the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that would clearly put it in greater prominence, those specifically, and then interspersed throughout. And one of the examples that my colleague Zell gave earlier around sustainability, there are a number of other initiatives that we've sort of worked with each of the organizations to embed in the proposals to hopefully address those issues. And then in terms of the monitoring and evaluation side of things, I think that flows down partly to the sort of foundation and its objectives and how it's now empowered to achieve the overarching goals in the group strategic plan, and to some of the monitoring and evaluation criteria that Michael mentioned earlier on. So hopefully that addresses the question, but in short, it has been something that has been part of our discussions and has fed its way into the suggestions for the refresh.
Thank you, Chris. And I think, yeah, a very important area, a very important place to put focus on. And I think this links quite nicely to the work our ITTF Foundation is doing in regards to the Sustainable Development Goals, but of course important for all the different areas to be able to ensure alignment across the different organizations within the ITTF group. We do also have a couple more questions coming in, one being a further follow-up question from Mr. Leviton, the European Table Tennis Union president, who has asked a question in regards to who is the general manager of this ITTF group, and what do you think? Do you decrease the role of the ITTF president and their influence of ITTF? So perhaps, Steve, do you want to help in providing an answer to those questions?
Sure, thanks. And I like the question very much, because I think it's an important question that we have to solve in the next months, especially as in 3 weeks we'll have the ITTF election, and there'll be a new ITTF president. I believe that ultimately it was the ITTF that has created World Table Tennis and the ITTF Foundation. So I believe, of course, the ITTF president must play the major role in working with those entities that the ITTF have created. We may not have done it perfectly in the last 1 year or so forth, but I believe that we have to improve that, and I hope to work with the new ITTF president on assuring that their role and position is not devalued or what's the right word, but to say it's not the intention or the goal for them to have less influence or power, or however you would like to put it. At the moment, I was the ITTF Executive Committee, which I think therefore proves that it's still the ITTF Executive Committee that has the ultimate decision making. They appointed me as the group CEO. Have to check exactly the date, but it's about 2 or 3 months ago that was announced, or just before Tokyo. So from the management point of view, it's currently myself leading that. And then I think it is important to put some governance around that. And of course, the ITTF president needs to be one of the leading persons involved in that. And I look forward to working also with those persons in that governance group to help make all of the entities future successful.
Thank you, Steve. A couple more questions. I think these are a couple that will be quite straightforward to answer, so I'll go through both of those myself. So we do have a question from Mr. Bahati from Rwanda in regards to the support and the prioritization of para-table tennis. So a couple comments to make there in regards to the importance of para-table tennis. Obviously, the ITTF has been working for 10 or so years in regards to the integration of para-table tennis into the table tennis family, obviously starting at an international level, but also trying to have that embedded into the various national associations around the world. And a lot of work has been done since, I think it was 2007 was when para-table tennis became part of ITTF on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, though, there are still lots of areas for improvement, and one of those is one of the propositions upcoming at this year's ITTF AGM, which looks to have para-table tennis included specifically within the objectives of the ITTF. So although there is still a lot of work to be done, there has been a good amount of the work completed so far, but also looking forward to the future of how we can ensure the importance of para-table tennis throughout the activities across all of the different organizations within the ITTF group. So thank you for that question. And then also a bit more of a remark from Joe Karim from South Africa with regards to the divide between, or the differences in abilities or access to opportunities between first and third world countries. However, is supportive, or a comment or remark that hopefully the participation program that's being rolled out at the moment, which has been quite a large piece of work from our high performance and development team, and as was mentioned earlier in the video conference as well. Hopefully this can help create a more harmonious environment between all of the different levels of national associations. And I think Steve sort of alluded to a little bit on the governance side as well, in regards to whether you call it a marking system, but to be able to provide reward for those associations who are able to follow not just the governance, but also have greater participation and so on. And this is an area that our high performance and development department have been working on in regards to categorization of the different member associations, which again will provide the overall support towards growth of table tennis on a global level. So that brings a close to the various questions that we have received, and we are approaching the 1 hour mark. So again, from my side, just a thank you to everyone for their involvement and being able to join this video conference today. As mentioned at the beginning, there are still a number of video conferences taking place in the next 2 weeks before the ITTF AGM is due to take place in a little bit over 3 weeks' time. Just a final remark from my side in regards to the strategic plan as well, and in line with sustainability, also in line with those famous words of a living and breathing document. One of the key elements in regards to keeping the strategic plan updated and refreshed and alive, we will look to transition the strategic plan into a website through technology rather than having a printed document on paper. And that's something we'll be looking to present next year when we do have the full review and refresh taking place over this next 6 to 7 months and the further stakeholder engagement that will take place. Another quick question has come in, and I will just make a quick remark on that as well, because I think it is quite relevant as well. So again, a question in regards to what extent has the strategic plan refresh taken into consideration the impact of factors external to table tennis and the ITTF family, such as the wider sport and entertainment industry and the growing esports industry, just as a couple of examples. So just to touch upon esports in particular, there was a project or a case study undertaken by ASOF, the Association of Summer Olympic International Federations, where they did also stress the importance of esports. So it has been an area that has been discussed already as part of the refresh. However, there does need to be further consultation and engagement. And again, that also links to some of the objectives that ITTF will look to amend and update as part of propositions and resolutions at the upcoming AGM as well. So the important element there will be that it hasn't been forgotten. And today was just touching the surface in some of the new topics that are relevant in the future of not just ITTF and table tennis, but what's impacting the overall sporting landscape around the world. So with that, I look to bring the video conference to a conclusion. And again, thanks everyone for their involvement and their participation throughout the video conference. And we look forward to seeing everyone again in a few days' time at the next video conference. Thank you and bye.